The choices that you're making are really either supporting you or not.
Straight from the pages of Victoria's Secret, please welcome Gisele Bündchen.
Gisele Bündchen!
Gisele has walked in nearly 500 fashion shows and graced the covers of more than 1,200 different magazines.
On paper, you're perhaps highly unrelatable.
You know what it is? It's a character. That's a job I do to kind of make a living so I can put food on the table. Raising children is by far the most challenging thing I've ever done.
It's a different kind of modeling.
It's the type of modeling that I prefer. Food is a perfect time for you to practice being present and mindful because it can be really simple. It doesn't have to be complicated to eat healthy. Nature is just it's me. Instead of trying to control nature, we need to just take a humble pill and learn from the big mama.
Today's episode is brought to you by the awesome organizations that make this show possible. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So excited to have you here today.
Yes, me too.
When this opportunity presented itself, I was like, of course I want to talk to Gisele. And then I had my own sort of mini panic attack. We're going to get into panic attacks. I'm like, what could I possibly talk to this person about? The all-time great supermodel of all time. Everybody knows this. On paper, you're perhaps highly unrelatable. But then the more you dig into your story and the more I kind of learned about your arc and your past and what brought you to this place, there's so much that's deeply relatable. And your kind of transformation story is remarkably similar to mine, although you did yours at 23. I was 40. But there's so much in there. So I thought it would be cool to kind of talk a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and how you made these changes in your life. Because I think you're in this interesting new season right now where, despite the fact that you've been this wellness advocate and wellness warrior for a long time, my sense is that there's a more full embrace of that now with kind of how you see yourself and what's important to you.
Oh, well, thank you for the introduction.
Sure.
The funny thing is people's, what I did for a living is something that kind of just happened to me at 14 years old. It was like, hey, do you want to be a model? And I thought, I can help my family. I can make a living and help. I have 5 sisters and all that. So modeling to me is something that is an opportunity that came along. I think in life you have these opportunities that either you take that train and then see where it goes, and I never even believed that this was going to take me and I was going to be doing this for almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that I was like, I'll start doing this job and, send money home and help my sisters go through school and do all that. And maybe in 5 years, I'll get a house because I didn't even go to school. I was emancipated at 14. And
yeah, you were in Tokyo at 14.
I was living in Japan without speaking English or Japanese, and that's when I started learning the language of energy. You know what I mean? Because you don't have to understand the language; you just have to feel, something. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more that is being said without words.
Sure.
So I started learning about that. But I think that I went through this journey of modeling, which was something I thought was going to last 5 years, and I was just going to help my family out for a little bit, and it just kept going. It just kept happening. I didn't even think you can have longevity in this career because it's not what I saw really around me happening. But it kept working out, so I kept doing it, and it was kind of a mindless thing, and you got in the hamster wheel, and I think we do that sometimes in life, and you're so young, you don't know, and you live the fast life and all of that. So in my early 20s, I developed, anxiety and panic attacks and all that because, when you drink a bottle of wine and that because you're I used to be a smoker, mm-hmm. So I can't even imagine I used to smoke. It feels like a whole different life, But it was the late 90s and there was a lot of drugs in fashion and all that. So I thought I was sane just because I was having some wine and smoking cigarettes. Everybody was doing way worse things than me.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen a lot.
I've seen a lot. Yeah, that's a whole other show about that. That's a whole other story. But yeah, so, so that was the beginning for me to start reconnecting with myself because I think when I was 14 and I got that train, my only focus was how can I be the best that I can do on this? And that was my focus. And I didn't measure any sacrifice. It was like if I had to work 360 days a year, and I felt like I couldn't say no because people were giving me a chance. And then I was like in this really overdrive and burned down my adrenals. I found out later when I found this amazing natural doctor who told me, like, listen, you don't have any more adrenals. They're shut down because you burned them, basically.
Sure.
I'm like, but I'm only 22, you know? So basically, I had to change the habits that smoking a pack of cigarettes, drinking alcohol every day to calm myself down, coffee all day to keep myself up, and also going from, one time zone to the next. I was 3 days in Paris, 2 days in London, 1 day in New York, going back to, my life was living in a suitcase. And of course, your nervous system is going to freak out, and the way I was eating, it was very, anything that was in front of me, I was just like not mindful about anything. I was just kind of like a workhorse.
Right.
And when that happened to me is when I come from a family that is very, my grandmother had a tea for everything. So we were not the kind of, you get sick, let me see this herbal remedy that we, so.
Yeah, you grew up in kind of a small village, right, in Brazil.
Yeah.
Your grandmother was cultivating herbs, and she was the person that everyone would go to for their remedies. So you have this sort of background and connection, with the earth.
Exactly.
That, is kind of lingering in the back of your mind when you're just, hammering nails and drinking wine and living that life. But you're young. It's like that's kind of what your 20s are for.
Kind of.
And you're on this like jet plane. I mean, figuratively and literally, like your career's taking off. On top of that, a people-pleasing tendency where you feel like you have to say yes to everything and you're just go, 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 go.
Yeah, and I think, but that was a big wake-up call for me because I think sometimes, you have to reach rock bottom. And when I had those anxiety and they start becoming like almost crippling because I couldn't get on planes. It was just, I was going to all these doctors and they were like, you have to take this stuff. And I was just afraid of taking anything because I've never taken anything. There was a tea for this. There was, my grandmother wasn't there. So finally, I wasn't going to take any medication because just the idea of taking something, I was like, I was normal before. How can I go back being what I was? Like I didn't have these issues. So what's happening? Long story short, I found this doctor. I had to replace my habits. It was that simple. I had to replace these habits that had created the reality I was living at that moment, which was, really killing me in so many ways, killing my spirit, killing my, and I replace it with good habits. So now instead of smoking cigarettes and having a mocha frappuccino in the morning, I'll go out and do breath work and go out for a run. And, I replace, in one day, I gave up everything. Because he looked at me, he said, Gisele, he called me Adrenalina. He says, do you want to live? And I said, I do. He's like, so we're going to change my diet. And that's for the first time in my life that I realized that I was really like the one who got myself there, and I was the only person who could get myself out by the choices that I was making. So I had to take full responsibility for what I had created, but it was in my power, only in my power to change that. There were no doctors, nobody who was going to save me. I had to change, the choices I was making, and I did that, and it was incredible because after over a year and a half, like really struggling with anxiety and panic attacks and all that, within 3 months, I was like, I never had another incident, and it was. And once you start meditating, I mean, at that point, this was 20 years ago, right? It wasn't like people were talking about meditation and yoga and any of that. It was just, when you sit in silence and you reflect, which is what we don't really give ourselves time to do because the world is so fast-paced and everything is catching your attention, is trying to throw you off your center. Everything is so busy. It's like an overload of information. To have that space to go inside and reflect and look and really take a step back. I think that was the biggest blessing of my life. So really, I think what could have killed me is what gave me a whole new life. And it was amazing because since then, like everything changed. Like I realized that food is my medicine. I realized that I am the director of my own movie, that I'm creating my reality based on the choices that I'm making, but what I'm choosing to, not only the people I'm choosing to have around in my life, but what type of energy, what kind of thoughts I allow to, what am I feeding, what kind of thoughts am I, so all of that. So that became like a big changing of seasons for me in my early 20s.
What were those first couple weeks like if you went completely cold turkey on all of these bad habits
I
at
think
once?
it was like a drug addict. I never was I guess I was a drug addict on illegal drugs, because I guess alcohol is a drug, and so is cigarettes, nicotine and all that, and caffeine and all that, but they're like socially accepted. But I tell you that I had the worst migraine. I mean, I felt like maybe that's what a person who's going, like you have gone to rehab, right? So I don't know what you felt. I would love to hear, but for me it was
fun.
like right? I mean, I don't know about that.
It's the only way I know how to do it, though. I don't understand how people kind of phase out of stuff. Like you have
it's
to,
hardcore.
for me, you have to
like,
draw the line and step over it, and it's going to suck, and you're going to be uncomfortable for a while. But you know that on the other side of that lies all of this opportunity and possibility. And
that's what happened to me. I think there was that, because what I knew that where I was, and if you do what you've always done, you're gonna get what you've always gotten. It's that simple. And what I realized at that moment, that what I created for myself was not what I wanted. I needed a drastic change. And then it was like, draw the line, stopped everything in one day, and the migraines and all of that, like the consequences of what I had done, I had to deal with them. It took me like 2 weeks, I think. I was like having the worst migraines just because I didn't know if it was the nicotine, the caffeine, the alcohol. I don't know what it was, but it was all of it together. And, but then it was amazing because from that experience, I became so much stronger, and there are like lots of different things that happened in my life after that. I feel like every time we get tested, it's like the Super Mario, like the little video game when you go to do the big boss, like you go through all the phases and you go to level 1, the big boss is like one, it's okay to defeat that one, but then the second one is like a tougher big boss, and then the third one is it's life. I feel like that's what life is. You get like the new tools to get equipped, and then you go to the next challenge that is a bigger one, and then is a bigger one. I feel like that's why we're here, to keep seeing how we can expand, how much more we can
to
grow, to evolve, to expand, to see how strong and how creative and how much we can experience of all this. Wonderful.
How did you plug that into the fast-paced life of your modeling career? Because it's one thing if you're living a more kind of grounded at-home lifestyle where you can control your food and your environment a little bit better. But when you're flying all over the world and you're on these sets and there's craft service and it's junk food, like you have to be way ahead of the curve to prepare everything, to have everything kind of organized for yourself, because how do you, if you're in just hotels all over the place and you arrive at midnight, like how are you getting your, how did you manage all of that?
You have to be very disciplined. I think, when I did this book called Lessons, and it was like everything starts with discipline. That was like my first chapter. And that's what I believe. You have to decide. And then you have to have the discipline to follow through. So once you realize that these choices that you're making are having a positive impact in your life, you want to continue doing them. You know what I mean? You don't want to fall back into something that you didn't feel good. That's your past. Like you don't want to go back there again. So you're going to stick to the plan. Like this is what's working and this is what made me feel good again. So I'm going to stick to this. And of course, it's not 100%. You have to be compassionate with yourself too and say, I'll be like, life is hard as it is. You don't need to beat yourself in the head sometimes if you go and I had like, I was exhausted. I had like a banana bread or something, or I had, But I think you realize that the choices that you're making are really either supporting you or not. Supporting you, living the life that making you feel good and living the life that you want and is taking to the direction where you want to go or not. And then it's just kind of an easier choice to make, right? And then I feel like when I go to the jobs, I got to the point in my life where people know how I eat and, I can tell people like, listen, this is what I want.
It's
I want
on the
salads.
rider. You got an extensive rider.
Yeah, I kind of, because I was already working for so long. So I have, I got to the, I guess, really the privilege to be able to kind of say like, this is the kind of things that I would like to eat. So please at the job, if you're working 10, 12 hours in a studio, can we have these things available? You know what I mean? So then it was easier to keep the food healthy, because I think that's so important. And then just to say, I feel like, and then saying no to those things, like coffee or alcohol, or things that I was just so used to because I was still in that same environment. The environment hadn't changed. I had changed. But all of that was around me still. But then it was just a choice of saying, I feel great. And I haven't drank alcohol in over 2 years now, too. This is something, even when I went back drinking after, it was very moderate. I was still like I would drink socially. Sometimes, peer pressure. Sometimes like, oh, come on, have a drink, and then you like feel like, especially in my world, I mean, everyone pretty much is like socially having a drink. So I would be like, okay, I'll have a drink. But then it got to a point that I was like, and that was like 20 years later because it just happened over 2 years ago. I was like, I don't want to drink. Like, I don't care what anyone thinks. And I don't care if they have peer pressure. I'm going to have my mint tea, my chamomile tea. And if they want to drink, I'm not making anyone feel bad about drinking. They can do whatever they want. This is their temple,
Yeah.
This is my temple. I get to choose. And they shouldn't make me feel bad that I don't want to, So then I kind of stood up for myself. I think that happens after your 40s. Like you care less about what other people think. And
wait till you're 50.
Oh my God, I can't wait for that. I'm gonna be like, he's gonna be amazing.
But I think the thing you mentioned like being directed and being kind of dedicated to your path, and I feel like that's the underappreciated aspect of understanding you and your career. A lot of people arrive in New York City every single day with a similar dream or ambition that you had when you were a young person and you arrived there. And a lot of those people are very beautiful. You're very beautiful, but that doesn't tell the story of how you translated like an opportunity into the career that you had. And I think between the lines, there is an intense work ethic and a very intentional approach to what you were doing. Like, how did you apply those skills? Like, what is the differentiator between you and the career that you've enjoyed versus, the other beautiful people who aren't enjoying the same kind of career? You're not allowed to say luck or
No, I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in luck. I believe in hard work. But I believe in, I think discipline, but I also believe that I always treated everyone the way I like to be treated. And I've always was appreciative. I have this immense sense of gratitude for just being there. So even though, people were like, oh, when I was 19, I was like, I won the model of, the model of the year. And everybody's like, how does it feel to be? It didn't matter to me because quite frankly, I never saw myself as a model. It's just not something, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. I didn't believe because I was a model or because I became successful in this job, like I was better than anybody. I didn't believe that. I believed that I just got to learn that craft really well and I understood what the job entailed and like I learned how to do the job really well, but it by no means is what defined me. It's just something I did. It's not who I am. I don't know if, it's like I go there, I had this opportunity at, 13, 14 years old when I finally left home and pursue this career that really, I thought it was just really, I did it for the money. I did it because I was like, what else am I going to do at 14 years old that I can help my family? I don't have any other jobs that are offering me an opportunity, so I'll take this one. So for me, it was really like a job. So I never it didn't kind of define me. I kind of did it my way. Like I never became like, it was like, oh, it needs to be glamorous. I was never glamorous. I'm a jeans and t-shirt type of girl. Like, and if I needed to go to parties or hang out with this type of people, I never did any of that. Like I went there, I did my job, I did the best that I could. I never was late in my life for my jobs. Like never showed up like late. I was there before everyone. I was there 100%. I just wanted to make sure that if people were booking me and they were trusting in me, that I was going to show up and deliver, And I think that's kind of what it was. I did it my way, and it didn't broke me kind of, because I saw, people in this business, you can lose yourself because if you drink the Kool-Aid, if you start thinking, like you lose yourself in it. I never lost myself. It was just a job and it's still just a job. I can't even believe I'm still doing it. Sometimes I go in and I do it. It's not what I do full time anymore, but it's just one of those things that, I got to do this. I got to make a career out of it and I got to make a great living and help my family. And I have wonderful, I got to travel the world and learn different languages and all of that. And that's how I see it. I don't see it as a, I don't see myself
You're
as
not defined by it.
Not at all.
You're not caught up in the kind of dark underbelly of that very
strange
world.
None of that.
World.
This whole world is like almost like a parallel reality for me. You know what I mean? It's like a switch on button. I go there, I do my job, I take my picture, I turn it off, I go home and I have the same friends, I have my family. I'm very close with my family.
But I think you're very good at seeing opportunities when they arise. And you tell a little story in the new book about being 14 and en route to Tokyo, and your dad gave you a little bit of money that was intended for getting a cab from
That's the first day I arrived in São Paulo.
And instead of using that money, it was
That's when I first
it was like
moved
when you were super young, right?
Yes, I was like,
you had a little bit of money
I took the
to
bus.
take a cab, and you had the presence of mind to say, this money would be better spent buying some clothes so I can do better in my auditions or whatnot, which isn't like, that's not normal. Like, that's somebody who's thinking ahead, who's planning long term, who's understanding that they have an opportunity in front of them and trying to figure out how to make the most out of it with limited resources. And I think that speaks to or says a lot about your sensibility or your perspective as a business person.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to see it that way. I mean, for me at that moment in time, I just felt like I did something else than that. That was one of the things. And now that you're saying that, I actually did that throughout, because I bought my first apartment when I was 19 years old. And when everybody was buying, designer bags, all the models, and, remember, I didn't know I was going to last in this business. I thought, I didn't go to school. I didn't go to high school. I didn't, I left. I went to work, and whenever I go back, I thought I was going to be a farmer or something, because I just always loved the land. But I didn't think where am I going to go from here? So I have to make sure that I have at least a place to live. I'm a Cancer, so I want to have a stable home. And when I was 19, people start flying me first class because I was the model of the year. I saw all the clients now are paying me first class. I was exchanging those tickets for coach classes because I was every 2-3 days in a different country. And instead of paying a rent in an apartment, I put down a down payment for an apartment, and then I was paying my mortgage instead of paying rent.
Yeah, and you're 19.
And I was 19, so I owned my first apartment as 19 years old. It was in New York City. It was facing a wall of another building, mind you. It was a very small apartment.
That's
it was
smart.
horrible.
That does require some maturity and some long-term thinking.
Well, because I just thought to myself, I don't know how long I'm going to stay here. I at least I have to have a place to live. If I'm not going to live empty-handed. You know what I mean? What do I care about a bag, or what is that going to give me? It's not going to be a roof over my head. I need to make sure that I can spend in the right places. But I think that sense came from my mother, because we grew up, my mother was a cashier in the bank. My father had lots of different jobs. He had a real estate job, but he was, my mom, literally, we were really simple people and grew up in 2 bedrooms with 6 girls, and money was always tight. So I learned how to, it's the same thing in the book. It's how do you prepare? How do you not waste food? I mean, everything is I think in my life I was kind of raised that way. You know what I mean? Kind of plan ahead, for tomorrow, so you make sure that you have food for everyone. We're gonna reuse the meat we cook on the barbecue, and we're gonna put it in the rice. We're gonna have carretera, so you're gonna have an abundant meal because we have the rest of the you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. It's you put money in the bank, so when you retire, you have something to live off when you can no longer work. The same thing I feel about food. You eat the right food, so when you're older, you're able to have the energy and your body is functioning because you made the right choices. So for me, it's the same thing. It's kind of making, just being kind of, what is necessary here? Do I really need this? What do I need more? Do I need a roof over my head, or do I need this bags and this stuff? Do I need to take a taxi when I arrive to the model's apartment when I'm 14, even though I've never been to the city? Or can I take the subway and save the money so I can get the clothes for the casting and maybe I can get a job? It's kind of thinking with the resources that I have right now, what is the smartest?
Sure.
How is the smartest way to use them, I guess?
If you're like me, never without a water bottle, let's get it right, people. Allow me to rock your world with my new favorite toy that's actually not a toy at all. It's a non-negotiable essential. Camelback's Podium Steel 100% leak-proof water bottle. Emphasis on leak-proof. For all you gearheads, this is built for the bike, but honestly, this simple but elegant stainless steel contraption is built for anything and everything. It keeps whatever you put in it cold for hours, and straight up goes everywhere I do. For all you weight weenies out there, Camelback actually also offers an ultra lightweight titanium version. Very beautiful. Shall we level up? Yes, we shall, because right now, Camelback is offering an exclusive discount just for you, all my people. So stop what you're doing and type up camelback.com, sign up with your email, and use my code RichRoll for 20% off your entire purchase at checkout. Or you can click the link in the description below. There feels like a distinction, a difference between Gisele Bündchen and the things that you care about, being this sort of homebody, family person, holistic lifestyle, like all of this stuff. And then, Gisele, the runway, on the runway. Like it's almost an alter ego.
It might be an alter ego, but it's, you know what it is? It's a character. I always call it her. Because I think being a model, what I understood as being a model is to play a character in a silent movie. You get to experience all these different all these different aspects of being a woman, let's say, because one designer wants you to be more androgynous, One designer wants, I remember doing a Balenciaga campaign, I was like, they made me a boy. I was like, literally, they put like a wig, I was like a man, a boy. And in one, I was like the sexy Versace campaign, like, with big hair and like, push-up bra, So it was kind of like I got to play from the androgynous girl to the very sexy to the tomboy. Like I got to, you should see, I don't know if you ever saw my book, the other one that was like the 20 years. I did a 20-year anniversary book.
I watched the video that you did where you kind of went through it and you were talking about what was going on with you with each of those photographs.
Yeah, so it's really about kind of playing these different roles, but it's just instead of you talking like you would be in a movie, you gotta make the image, that picture, that one capture image to
it's a performance art.
It's a performance art.
Yeah, but it's such a weird world, though. I know that, like, Alexander McQueen, he was really the catalyst, right?
Yeah.
He was the guy who kind of made it happen for you.
He gave me the chance, He gave me the chance.
But when you watch his shows or some of these other shows, like, the designs are stunning and gorgeous, but they're also totally inaccessible. It's like,
you can't
who wears
wear
this?
that.
Does anybody? Is there anybody in the world that even wear? I mean, if you're Lady Gaga, I guess, or
it's
somebody like that. But like, yeah, it's a fantasy,
Yeah.
and so it's curious. Like, how does that translate into? I guess it's just how you feel and how you think about a particular designer or a brand, and not so much about directly selling those designs to the person who's going to the department store or the boutique, right?
Yeah, they're not thinking.
I don't even
that.
understand the business model of the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, neither, to be honest with you, but I think it's I think it has changed a lot since I started. Like, I see a big shift because I think before there was a lot more creativity. There was allowed a lot more creativity. I think, McQueen or John Galliano, the shows and stuff, like you were like in a fantasy world. Like
sure, and the photographers being
everything.
Rock stars themselves.
Oh, yeah. And it was I think it was a moment in time where there was so much less about selling, but it was much more about the inspiration and the aspiring, the aspiration of creating like a fantasy and like a... And it was a lot of fun then, I have to say, at that time, because, it was a lot...
I would have been dead. I wouldn't have survived it. I would have gone all in. I would have been
like,
at every after-hours party. It would have been a disaster.
You see, I was in bed, like, studying my astrology books till, like, by 10. That was me. I was like, by 10, I was like, oh, no, I have to go. I was like, I have to start early so I can go to bed early. So for me, it was a different thing. But... but I guess for me, I also felt very responsible because I didn't want to, one of the guiding lights for me, I really believe, was my parents, because I saw how hard they work and I didn't want to disappoint them. So I think part of like me being so stay on the line was like, I'm not disappointing my parents. I don't care if they're not here. They are going to know what I'm doing. Like, I remember part of the reason why I got so freaked out about the McQueen show when they sent me out like without a top, because I couldn't speak English and they didn't even do a fitting anyway. So then I was like, oh my God, if my parents see this, they're going to make me go back home. And then
What is it like when you go back home? But it wasn't an
internet. But there was no internet in 1997, It wasn't. So thank God, because they didn't even saw that. Otherwise they would have been like, what are you doing? I'd be like, I don't know.
And you have 5 siblings, right?
I have 5 sisters.
Yeah.
I'm a middle child. I have 2 older sisters and 2 younger sisters. And I'm a twin. And the middle. So we are like the sandwich, like the cheese in the sandwich.
Being Brazilian, you're connected to the Amazon and to climate change issues, and you've done a lot in terms of your environmental advocacy and clean water initiatives. Talk a little bit about how that began and what that looks like now.
You know, I've always been a big, basically, like a child of nature. I always tell my children when they ask, what's your religion? They say, Mom, we don't go to church. I say, you know what? You're in church every day. I say, what do I say when people ask what my religion is? I say, love is your religion and nature is your church. That's your cathedral. That's the big church. That's our temple, So you honor your temple. You love your temple. Because that's the only reason why we are all alive, because this whole ecosystem is making it possible, to grow our food, to provide us with all the things we need to survive. So, and that's how I grew up. I felt that way, and especially having a grandmother that everything was from the earth. She grew everything she ate, and the earth was giving us the herbs that we needed to, like when we fell ill, and I grew up in that way. So when you grow up in that way and you grow up running around bare feet, I come from a small village, and anytime you want to eat something, you grab, there was like a tangerine tree or like an orange tree or a plum tree, and you just go and pick up the fruit from the tree. We never bought fruits from the supermarket. You go, either you had it in your backyard or your neighbor had it or the other neighbor, somebody had the fruit you wanted to eat, you just go grab it. So I think when you live with that connection to nature, you have a different appreciation. So I feel like nature is just like, it's me. Like, I think we are, we are that. And I think this connection from nature for me is not something, it's just something I've always known, is how I grew up. And so for me, taking care of, which I love, which is nature, is natural. But the first time I realized there was really problems happening is when I went to actually spend some time with the indigenous people in the Xingu area of the Amazon in the 2004. And that's when the first time I realized, pesticide, what pesticides were doing, what mining was doing, how they were contaminating the rivers. And basically all the indigenous tribes, they were living and depending on that water, they were getting sick. And even though they were living very wholesomely, with nature and, by the impact that the big farms and different mining and all that stuff was having, was really having a really terrible impact in their livelihoods. And that's when the first time I was like, I need to do something about it. And that's when I started, like I had a flip-flop line at the time in Brazil, and we gave a percentage, to, that's actually a funny story, the indigenous people. And I was like, I wonder what they would do with these funds. But it was like a group that helped the indigenous in Brazil. And the funny enough, when I turned 40, this was in 2004, so I was like 24. Cut to when I'm 40, 2020, I was 40. I wanted to do something for my 40th birthday, and I was like, I want to plant some trees in the Amazon, and how are we going to do it? So we looked around for who can help us do that, and we contacted the people that are working with the indigenous people that we knew in Brazil, and they're like, we have the largest seed bank in the Amazon. And we started with the money, with the whole program that you gave in 2004, that money that was for the sale of the flip-flops. Now, years later, they had the largest seed bank of, the indigenous, they collected the largest seed bank. And this is how, with that whole group of people, we basically planted over 300,000 trees in that area of the Amazon. So that was like years later. So that's just how funny how life goes. But for me, because I was so connected to nature and I always wanted to help, and my dad always said, water is the most important thing. And of course, I saw that with the indigenous people, because that's how they were all getting sick, because all the residue of mining and pesticides were going into their water. In my little village, we were having a lot of problems with agriculture as well, where there was a lot of runoffs from Roundup and all the stuff that they use in agriculture, all the pesticides and stuff. And it was getting a lot of people sick. So we actually did the Agua Limpa program in 2000, and I think it was 2009, or I don't remember when we started, but it was like a long time ago. And I funded it. And my dad, who's also a sociologist, worked with the university, and we basically regenerated the whole area of the river that was kind of, getting the water to the city, and we were able to clean it. It took us like a few years to do it, Wow. It was pretty simple because all we had to do, it was not simple. My dad is the one who did the work. It was simpler for me. I just kind of funded it. But he was there every day. He had to work with, I don't know how many farmers. You had to take their piece of land and kind of grow the native species forest the native forest back. So then
there's a buffer.
There was a buffer,
yeah.
and then the root systems could filtrate it before all that stuff would go into the river. And then that was the Agua Limpa project, and that was one of the projects we did to clean the water. And anyway, so there's lots of different things, but in the overall thing, my thing is, we gotta take care of Mother Earth. She takes care of us. When people say to me, "Oh, we're going to save the planet," I say, that's such an ego thing. As humans, we think we're going to save anything. The planet is in her own process of evolution. This is dinosaurs were here before us, and Lemuria. So many different civilizations.
The planet will be fine.
That's what I always say. I say, please don't fool yourself. I think we are really saving ourselves.
We need to, yeah.
I say, there's no saving the planet.
We need to reel ourselves back.
Yeah, this is really about us protecting the resources and taking care of what we really need for our survival, because once we are gone, the planet is going to regenerate. I've seen this over and over again. The planet regenerates itself so quickly, because it's just a very intelligent. We need to learn from nature instead of trying to control nature. We need to just take a humble pill and learn from the big mama.
We've moved so far away from that, and we do live in this dualistic mindset where we think there's, our environments and then there's nature, or there's us and that's outside. But really understanding that you're never out of nature, as you said, I think is the first point of trying to really deepen your relationship with the world in which you live. And we all live and share. Yeah. And I think when it comes to the Amazon, we all hear about deforestation and all the, clearing that's going on for cattle grazing and the strip mining and all the stuff that you mentioned, but it's an abstraction, especially for, people in North America. We know what's going on, we know it's bad, but I've never visited there. I've never seen it myself. And you being Brazilian gives you kind of a deeper appreciation and understanding of the extent of it.
I think it's how people tell the story, because I think it's a lot deeper than, I think people, depending on the industry that wants to benefit from something, they tell the story and they say, okay, this is what we're going to do is about the cattle.
Greenwashing.
Oh, yeah. It's so crazy. A lot of NGOs go in there and they say, we're going to have an NGO because we're going to, protect Amazon. But meantime, they're the owners of the bigger paper company that comes from the Amazon. Mm-hmm. They are just not, you know what I mean? So
it's not all as it seems.
It's a wild, wild west there. And one of the biggest, I've been there a few times and also done a lot of just kind of talking to people and understanding what happens there. And a lot of the, there's ancient woods there, and a lot of that goes to Europe. So what a lot of the cattle, for example, is what they use to kind of occupy the land. But what they're really after, which is really valuable there, is gold and
the rare metals.
The rare metals, yeah, the rare metals and the gold and all that stuff that's in there. That's what interests this, right. The different countries, let's say, that are not Brazil, and because it's so corrupt, unfortunately, Brazil is very corrupt. The politicians are very corrupt. What happens is they sell those rights to those countries, and then we have what we have. And then the cattle, in the end, they just kind of put them there because they have to occupy the land after because they have to enter. If you go there,
removed everything,
because they have to remove the value. The value.
Then they put all the cows there.
That's what they do. So they remove the ancient wood. They remove the precious metals, but they have to get there, because if you fly over it, you're flying for hours over just a green carpet. So for you to have access to that, you can't just clear cut because it grows. So what they do to keep the forest from growing, they just throw, because it's very fertile, the soil, as soon as you cut, because imagine that soil has been there, receiving all those healthy bacteria from the leaves falling, is super fertile. So within 3 days, grass grows.
Right.
And then in order for the trees not to keep growing, because if you just leave abandoned, that's what's going to happen. The birds are going to carry the seeds. They're going to drop the seeds. Things are going to start growing again. And then they won't have access, So they kind of, it's just like a cycle. But what they're really after it is the big stuff. And it's not, unfortunately, it's so sad, it's greed. Mm-hmm. In the end of the day, it's greed. And it's greed by people that, they don't have those natural resources where they are, and they understand the situation in Brazil and how corrupt the system is, with the politicians. And they come and they They just buy
Exploit it.
those, right? They exploit
Yeah.
it. They exploit it in every way. But and in the end of the day, it's I think greed is the biggest disease of our time.
You're not going to get an argument from me on that. Over the last decade of hosting this podcast, my mission has been to engage in what I consider to be critically important conversations about the things that matter most in life. Things like health, relationships, growth, purpose, and service. While I'm immensely grateful for the growth of this show, I've also come to realize that my voice alone is not enough. This mission is not and cannot be a solitary endeavor. So I wanted to find a way to help amplify other meaningful voices. And the result is Voicing Change Media, this beautiful consortium of thinkers, of storytellers, artists, and visionaries, all committed to fostering meaningful exchanges, intentionally curated for those committed to the path of self-discovery. This network will share transformative conversations that inspire, that educate, that entertain, and perhaps most importantly, empower you to live authentically and purposefully. Together, we're creating a space of growth, a space of understanding, where every exchange has the potential to enrich our lives and catalyze profound personal and planetary change. To explore all the shows in the network, visit voicingchange.media, give us a follow on Instagram @voicingchange, and again, visit voicingchange.media to learn more and subscribe. Back to the wellness stuff. Mm-hmm. You're so intentional with food and lifestyle practices, breath work, like all of these kind of protocols and the ways in which you live that you express and explain in this book. It's a lot, and you have 2 kids. They're, how old are they now? Like 15
14 and 11.
11.
And I have a bonus child that is like going to be 17. So.
Oh, okay. Right. How do you instill these choices in your parenting? How do you get your kids excited about the things that are in their best interest from a wellness perspective?
I think the number one thing I feel is like monkey see, monkey does, right? I think you have to be the example. You have to live it. Because I think whatever you say is one thing, and whatever you do, they need to, whatever you say, whatever you do, they have to be the same thing, right?
Simpatico.
Yeah, they have to be simpatico. And that's what it is. And I think for my kids were a lot easier because I was home a lot with them. So I was, taking them to school every day, making their breakfast, just having my gardens at home, growing the food. So when the kids would come for play dates at the house, my kids were grabbing like everything raw, cucumbers, carrots, like green beans. They were just grabbing it from the garden and like collecting things and putting in the basket. It was like a game for them. And it was like, oh, friends are coming over. What are we going to grab for us to do a picnic outside? And then, so they grew up in that way, so it was easier for me to feed them healthier food and explain to them, we always composted. We had bees at our house. So they were learning about, when the beekeeper would come and they explain, how much honey can you take and how much honey do you leave for the bees and how does a queen bee work and all the. So they're
emotionally connected.
They were emotionally connected. Yeah. They were part of that, like I was as a kid. So for them it's really natural. And they were also homeschooled for the last 3 years during the whole pandemic thing. And we moved from Boston to Tampa, so it was a whole new world for them. So I homeschooled them, and now they just went back to school. But I have to tell you, I see a huge difference, especially because my son is 14 now, so he wants to kind of push back.
This is what I'm getting at.
Oh, yeah. Well, how old are your kids?
Well, they range from 28 to 16, and there's 4, and each of them is different. But it's a delicate dance because, we raised our kids similarly. But they reach a certain age, and part of individuation and maturing is taking ownership for your own choices and understanding what you stand for and what you don't. And in order to really define that and hone that, you have to go out and kind of push the envelope and try new things. Otherwise, it's just something you're doing because that's the way you were raised and that's what your parents told you, as opposed to really owning it for yourself. And so we have learned that you have to have the reins very loose and let them go out and do what they want to do and control the environment at home, but be, very kind of nonplussed if they go and make a choice that you wouldn't make or whatever, and just be curious about it and allow them the space to do that. And, you hope they come back and, do it the way you taught them to. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And again, every one of them is different in our case. But
I think in
as
every
they get to a
case.
certain point, and especially, when they're with peers and friends and they're in social situations, those things they have to learn for themselves. And you have to allow them to, I think.
It's so interesting.
So you have to
say
let
that.
go a little bit.
Oh, let go and let God.
Yeah.
I tell myself that is like a mantra. And I remind myself of, like, my mom let me leave home. She emancipated me, and I was living in Japan at 14, and there was no cell phones. Like,
Can you imagine doing that for one of your children right now?
No, and actually, you know what is so funny? Because I was having a conversation with my son about that. He was complaining, I have chores in my house. Kids have to do their chores. So set the table, wash the dishes. Now I make a point, I cook it, they come from school, I'm cooking, so one has to set the table, whoever sets the table, the other has to wash the dishes. And there is you have to clean your room. You have to do the basic stuff,
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is doing amazingly. She loves it, and she's really good and very proud of herself. Mom, look how good I clean the dishes. She's really good. And she's washing herself. She's not putting it in the machine. She wants to learn how to really wash it and do it right. And she's very focused on it. My son is always why do I have to do this, So actually, we had a breakthrough this Christmas, this whole holiday season. Because he says to me, I'm going to leave home when I'm 18, Mom. And I don't know if I'm going to go to college. You didn't go to college. You didn't go to school. I'm going to just leave home when I'm 18, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. I'm like, okay, that's great. So you're going to live in your own apartment, and who's going to cook for you? And who's going to wash your dishes? And who's going to clean your clothes? Who's going to do that? And he's like, for a second, he's like, because you're not going to have a chef and and he was thinking for a second, and I say, well, this is why when Mommy tells you to do those things at home, is because I want to give you more tools for your toolbox. Because when you learn how to do those things and they become second nature to you, then you don't even have to think about it. You become empowered to do it for yourself. You don't depend on anybody. And that's nothing. It's amazing to be able to do that. I said, you know what made me feel so strong and capable when I left my home? Because my mom taught me how to do those things. So when I left home and I was living by myself at 14 years old, I was first at 13. At 14, I moved to Japan. But because I was living in a mother's apartment, I was the only person there who knew how to clean, cook, iron, do absolutely everything in the house because my mom taught me. And it was easy for me. I didn't think it was a struggle. I was happy to do it. And I was happy to do it for the other girls that didn't know how to do it. But if you're going to be planning on living on your own at 18, who do you think is going to do all those things for you? So all I'm telling you is take advantage that Mommy is here for you right now, and I'm able to teach you all those things. And you can do it at your time. I'm not telling you at this time you have to wash the dishes. So let me just help you. I'm going to create a list for you, and you just have to do them. And you can decide if you want to wash clothes once or twice a week. You can decide if you want to wash the dishes right after dinner or before you go to bed, whatever you want. But if you learn how to do those things, you're going to see how empowered you're going to feel. And the more tools we can put, the more things, the simple things like that you can learn and that you can equip your toolbox to do, you're just going to be just that much capable. And there's nothing more fulfilling than feeling like you're able to do stuff, that you're capable. And then he looked at me and he's like, okay, Mom, so when we get back home, you give me that list and I'm going to do it. I'm like,
oh, wow. I was going to say, did he actually receive that?
I think I have a breakthrough. I think I got a breakthrough.
The hormones are raging, whatever, Mom, storming off. You can get that reaction too. That was good. Good job.
Don't you think that was a good thing? But you see, it was a moment that I used what he said, because when he thought to himself, that's true. How am I going to do all that stuff? I say, you don't want to live in a messy, stinky place that is not clean. You want to have, so you need to know how to do this stuff. And I think I see all the things that happen in life like that, different tools we acquire, even the job that my job, all the tools that I've acquired in this job, all the things that I've learned to do. that I don't know when I'm going to use. I use them for my job, but maybe they're going to be useful like in 20 years from my life.
Sure,
know?
but you came from very different circumstances. It's the peril of success, right? Like you and the kid's dad like worked very hard to achieve all of these things in life, and now they're reared in like an insane degree of privilege, and it becomes more difficult to instill that kind of work ethic into somebody who grows up that way.
I think you're correct. I think it becomes a lot more difficult, but I think it goes back to the discipline and it goes back to priorities. And I think for me, it becomes about what kind of, I feel like I'm their guardian because we don't possess our children, right? I mean, we just come here, they come through us, but they're as much as our teachers as we are their teachers, and we're constantly learning and teaching, in every relationship in our life. And I feel that we get this moment in time, which is very short in a way, that we get to influence our children, because then they go, look at my parents, they had 14 years to influence me. Then I was out into the world and I never went back. And I keep remembering, like, what are all the things that if they wouldn't have taught me those things, where would I be today? And I'm so grateful for them, for those lessons. And I feel like, yes, I grew up in very different circumstances than my kids, and it is a bit more challenging to have them, make their bed and wash the dishes and clean their, when I have a person that can do it too. But I make a point of me doing it, so then they learn that, oh, mommy's doing the dinner, mommy is making the breakfast, mommy is, so they're like, we can do it. You have to model, and I feel like
it's a different kind of modeling.
Is the type of modeling that I prefer. It's the type of modeling that I find to be the important type of modeling, because that's what's the most important thing you're going to do in your life. I feel like raising children is by far the most challenging thing I've ever done, and the most fulfilling at the same time. And but I feel that if I don't do that, if I don't equip my children to be good, capable assets, for themselves in their lives, if they're not going to be, then I fail. I feel.
Yeah, you haven't done your job.
Then I haven't done my job. I feel that that's my job. That's a job I do to kind of make a living so I can put food on the table and have, but my real job as I think as a mom, and I chose to be a mom, so I have to show up for my kids. And I feel like these things that I think is really what shaped me and what made me who I am today was definitely the upbringing that I had and what my parents, how they guided me. And I feel like that's really important. So I make that a priority in my life, to make sure that my kids are going to have, even though they don't have those same needs, to do those things, because my mom didn't have a person she could pay to come clean the house. We had to, you clean the bathroom, you clean the, it was like a list. All of us have to share between us who's going to do what. And we grew up that way. And it was kind of fun because, I always loved the cleaning part. I love organizing and cleaning. I feel like a clean house is a clean mind, is like what's out is in. If everything is organized outside, I can think. And I tell my kids that, and I feel that if I can really get them to do those simple things in life, and learn those things and teach them how to be self-sufficient and capable human beings, I feel like I've done my job, and then I can rest. And then whatever else they do, the choices they make, if they choose to eat the food that I fed them when they were little, if now they want to go eat, whatever, or, it's going to be what they're going to do. They're going to choose their friends. Hopefully they choose wisely, because in the end of the day, they are going to be the one dealing with the consequences of their actions. And I always tell them, like, listen, you're going to go out there and you're going to make whatever choice you make, there are going to be consequences. You're dealing with those consequences, not me. This is your life.
And sometimes they need to make those mistakes and face those consequences.
Like we had. How many mistakes you done? I have a list. I don't even remember.
And those experiences are formative. Like, I'm sure if you look in the rearview mirror and think about the panic attacks that you were having on airplanes and your inability to get into an elevator and, this desire to jump off your balcony, on some level, you wouldn't wish that experience on anybody. But you probably wouldn't want to change your experience either, because it's set in motion this whole sensibility and way of being that you now have. And I think with kids, they, regardless of whether they hear you in the moment or whether they go out into the world and make a bunch of mistakes, like, they come back.
Yeah.
And whatever you taught them it's in there. And at some point when they're ready or whatever, like they return to it.
And and I think to trust that, it's very important. And I also feel like,
Because if you try to overly control it, you're going to drive them away.
absolutely.
So-
And I think for me, I keep going back to me as a kid and the trust my parents had in me to let me go. And I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for them trusting in me and for all the mistakes that I've made and then had to come the other side and figure out for myself. So I think it's important to give our children the dignity of their own process, because we had a dignity. We have to go through our own process to become who we are. And I think as long as they know that we are there and what is our values, is like those things that are important. What is that we stand for? What's important for us, as a value, as a core value, as being a good human being and a good person. And if you thought that your children and they got it, in the end of the day, they're going to go out there in the world and they're going to have to make their mistakes. And I think the best thing you can do for them is just be there for them whenever they come back and if they want your help. And I think it's hard because you want to protect them. Like you can put bubble wrap on them so like nothing will touch them and they will be safe. But in the end of the day, that's unrealistic. And it's like,
it doesn't work anyway.
You know what? I like this idea. There's a metaphor of the butterfly. Imagine the caterpillar as she is transforming into becoming the butterfly. She's eating all the, until she finally starts spinning into a cocoon. And then she has to like go through that whole strenuous process. If you ever seen like,
They turn into glop.
Yeah, but they're like,
before
but
they-
it's exactly, it's just, and it's really kind of like hard to, like when they're coming out, it's like really awkward and it looks like there's very strenuous and very difficult. So if you go in there and you try to help them come out, you're going to cripple them. You're going to cripple the butterfly and she won't be able to have the strength she
The
needs
struggle
to.
is
So the struggle is what makes
crucial to the growth.
And you have to give them the dignity of their own process. You have to be, and I keep reminding myself, I cannot take away that opportunity for them because my parents gave me the opportunity for me to go through my own challenges and I grew and I want my kids to have that same opportunity because whoever they're going to become is going to be based on what their choice is. And hopefully I gave them enough good example and good values where they would make the choices that is right for them,
What is it that you want people to understand or take away from the new book and how you are modeling this lifestyle? Whether it's dietary changes, lifestyle changes, movement practices, how can somebody who is interested in kind of leveling up across the board begin the process of making those changes in their life?
It's funny, because when I decided to do a cookbook, I'm the farthest thing there is from a chef. Let me tell you something. I'm not a chef. Let me just...
let's be honest. You've got a private chef at home. That person is taking care of everything
not
for you.
anymore. I used to.
You do? You
That's
don't
for sure.
anymore?
No, I don't. I don't.
Come on.
No, the last 2 years I don't.
You're cooking your own meals?
Yes, I'm cooking my own
All right.
meals. Yeah. I grew up that way and I want, like I told you, like my priority is showing my kids what I believe it's important for them. And I can't say, oh, this is important, and then I'm not doing it. You know what I mean? So it has to be cohesive, right? And I think that for me, really being like living what I believe is very important, and I was showing my kids that this is important to me. Like the only way I'm going to show them that is by doing that. So yes, I had chefs, and this is how I learned how to cook a lot of the things. A lot of the recipes in the book are like inspired by the things that I created with the chefs that I had throughout the years. I had the opportunity to really work with incredible people, incredible chefs, people that love food as much as I do because I love food. But it was really an idea for me to, look, I can say, go and meditate, go and exercise. I believe meditation, I believe rest, I believe exercise, I believe nutrition, all of those things are extremely important for you to be able to take kind of ownership of your health and really take care of yourself and work on just having a more clear mind and just feeling more connected to yourself. I think all of those things are different aspects of it. But the reason about the cookbook is, quite frankly, I was seeing kids were coming to our house and in play dates and moms would come and be like, how did you get my kid to eat broccoli or roasted vegetables? And it was like so simple. And I was like, oh, maybe we can share how to make some simple recipes that are super easy. You can make it like in 10 minutes. And, moms, you just sometimes feel overwhelmed. And I know because life is busy. There's so much going on. So I was like, how can I help in this way? And also I feel like food is a perfect time for you to practice being present and mindful, because you can eat like on a rush and not being present, and the food have one effect in your body. Or you can do something, which is what I talk about in the book, is like every time I look at my food, not only the act of preparing your food, there's so much love, and you're touching the food and you're connecting with your food, that's one thing. But even if you're not the one cooking your food, just to take a moment to bless your food, to acknowledge that is something that is alive, that you're taking it, and that's also your source of life, so it's kind of like connecting to the food in that way. I think it does something, because everything is energy. So you're having a transfer of energy with something, and with the intention that you're eating, it has a different, I feel huge, when I start doing that.
It does make a difference.
How it has a different, just being present and being connected to what you're doing, having gratitude for that moment. And you get to do that 3 times a day, I mean, now I have a juice once a day, but I still bless my juice. But it's just kind of like, it's just this book, what I would like to for people to take is like, it can be really simple. It doesn't have to be complicated to eat healthy. And really, like if you have plans, my mom taught me, since I was a kid, like no food waste. So how can we organize our meals so we can, so
there's a big thing about like reducing waste.
Yeah, for me, that's huge. And also like meal planning. Like if you're going to buy, because, food sourcing, that's huge. It's not about having something with a lot of condiments and a lot of stuff. It's just like, keep it simple, but buying really great quality products. Like if you can do that, and then instead of like, because a lot of people are like, oh, and then you buy organic and then you throw it out because it's like, it spoils much faster. And I'm like, yeah, but if you have a meal planning, and I teach that, I kind of give some suggestions in the book. Like my mom did that. I grew up like that because she didn't have time. She was working all the time. So she had like in the fridge, like what we're going to have for the whole week. So she will go to the groceries and she'll buy, and then the things will roll out to the next day. So you will always know what we were eating, and things that wouldn't be eaten could be easily transferred for the next day and be made into the next
organized
meal.
So that nothing spoils, and you're
so nothing spoils, and you never had food waste because you're always taking it from one day to the next, so it's never wasted, and you always have great quality food. You get organized, you have like your broths and all those things that you cook like on the weekend, and you put it in the freezer, so broth makes everything taste better. So if you make a rice, if you make a soup, anything, you just put broth in it is amazing. Even if you're making a grilled chicken, you just put broth in it, makes it amazing. So it was just like introducing an idea of how can we eat healthier, and how can we also practice, in a way, a meditation, because maybe people are not going to sit for 30 minutes or 15 minutes, however long, in meditation. But if they can just take that moment, and then it just becomes the practice of observing and of having these moments of gratitude in a day, it just changes your life, because it's kind of like you practice, you start little by little, and when you realize you're having moments of gratitude 100 times a day about everything, because that kind of seed was planted. And then you're like, wow, like I get to experience this, and then life suddenly changes, because the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Like for us is ordinary maybe to have a plate of food, but for so many people it's not,
Well, the more kind of mindfulness and presence that you can bring to a mundane experience, the more extraordinary it becomes.
But and then life becomes really amazing,
because it's great. Yeah, no, it's a beautiful book, and it's very accessible. And like you said, like it's simple. It's like simple stuff, easy to prepare, super healthy. Let me ask you this. What is the challenge or the obstacle that you're facing right now that you're trying to work through this year? Like what is coming up for you in the spirit of bringing intentionality into kind of the new year and what you want to manifest and express?
I think I'm always working constantly in patience, and in being patient and just accepting the timing of things, from the simple things, like I have a project or something I'm working on, and I'm like, and people are not moving at the speed that I want, or I'm doing a construction and like, it's supposed to be finished, and it's like still not like, in whatever area it is. I think one of the things that I really am working on is to not allow the outside, the intensity of whatever is happening in the outside.
There's a lot of noise around you.
There's a lot of noise.
That has to be hard. If we had more time, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah,
but
that
has to be challenging.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise. So I think the thing is, how do I look at everything and have the patience and the compassion also for myself and for others, and just kind of be in that space of, allowing things to be what they are and not try to change them, and just accept them for what they are and release that, and just be, and just kind of go back to putting the focus on the things that I can control, and just keep working at that. Just that's like an everyday
ongoing
battle. Yeah, it's an everyday
I can't imagine
exercise, and I guess, it's I get to do those things. I feel like, this is happening for me. I'm not the type of person who's like, why is this happening to me? I'm like, why is this happening for me? There's always an opportunity for me to grow, and there's always so many. So, but I think this of just kind of accepting what is it's a kind of something that's on my consciousness and is constantly coming to me every day for me to exercise patience, compassion for myself, for others, and just kind of stay on that. Things are exactly as they meant, as they are, and it's perfect. Everything is perfect as is.
Well, I need a little bit more of that in my life too.
Yeah. It's a practice. It's like I haven't achieved that yet, but that's what I'm working on. I'll let you know if I
let me
get
know.
to the other side.
I gotta let you go. So thank you so much. That was
so
absolutely
much.
delightful.
Thank you.
So fun meeting you and talking to you. Everybody pick up the new book, Nourish, at your favorite bookseller. We'll link all that stuff up in the show notes.
That's awesome.
And come back and talk to me again sometime. This
I
is
would
super
love to.
fun. And I'm going to go straight to Erewhon and get your new smoothie.
Yes.
That's why you came to LA to get that up on its feet.
I had like 4 yesterday. I was like, oh my God, I ate so much. I couldn't even eat at dinner barely last night. But it's the immune booster smoothie because Gaia Herbs. I don't know if you know Gaia Herbs.
Yeah.
They're amazing. I've been using them for 20 years. Actually, when I was having my panic attacks, my doctor at the time suggested I take adrenal supplements. And that's how I learned about them 20 years ago. Funny now, 20 years later, here I am working with them because I think they're amazing. And so I wanted to do an immune boost smoothie, and really a great after workout smoothie. So like something that I could just like a meal that I could have after workout. So in this one, there was like coconut meat, coconut milk, acai. I grew up in acai. I love that. So superfood. There is lucuma. There is, of course, elderberry syrup from Gaia Herbs. And I have bananas, frozen bananas. So it kind of gives like a little thickness. And I have almond butter. And I also put some collagen in there. Some vanilla collagen. So it's a yummy stuff. It's really filling. You're going to like it. You have to tell me what you think about it after.
I will.
But it's really yummy. It feels like a dessert, but it's so good. It's full of good stuff. Nutrient dense.
Awesome. Do I have to take out a second mortgage on my house to buy this smoothie?
No,
maybe, right?
But it's a meal. Like I promise you,
Okay.
once you drink this, it's literally like a meal. So once you're done with it, you're not going to be hungry for the last like 4 or 5 hours. You'll be like all good to go.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed the conversation. To learn more about today's guest, including links and resources related to everything discussed today, visit the episode page at richroll.com, where you can find the entire podcast archive, as well as podcast merch, my books, Finding Ultra, Voicing Change in the Plant Power Way, as well as the Plant Power Meal Planner at meals.richroll.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, the easiest and most impactful thing you can do is to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube, and leave a review and or comment. Supporting the sponsors who support the show is also important and appreciated. And sharing the show or your favorite episode with friends or on social media is, of course, awesome and very helpful. And finally, for podcast updates, special offers on books, the meal planner, and other subjects, please subscribe to our newsletter, which you can find on the footer of any page at richroll.com. Today's show was produced and engineered by Jason Camiolo, with additional audio engineering by Cale Curtis. The video edition of the podcast was created by Blake Curtis, with assistance by our creative director, Dan Drake. Portraits by Davey Greenberg. Graphic and social media assets courtesy of Daniel Solis. Thank you, Georgia Whaley, for copywriting and website management. And of course, our theme music was created by Tyler Pyatt, Trapper Pyatt, and Harry Mathis. Appreciate the love the support. See you back here soon. Peace. Plants. Namaste.